Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program as we look into the book of Hebrews, and we're in chapter 7. Before we do that, please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. Thank you to those who do support our ministry through your prayers and through your financial gifts. Okay, we're in Hebrews chapter 7. We are in verse 6. Actually, we're in verse 5, I guess. We'll start in verse 4 just to give a little bit of background. It gets very difficult, okay? And we're going to see what we can do to clarify some of this. This gets very difficult to wade through, but we're going to see what happens as we look into this. Now, understanding that Melchizedek may still have been a man, he's for sure foreshadowing of Jesus. If he is not the pre-incarnate Christ, he is the foreshadowing of Jesus, okay? So we'll just have to leave it at that till we get down a little bit further. Now consider how great this man was. Now this is Hebrews 7:4. Now consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoil. So in other words, Abraham was the top dog of the time. Okay? So he even paid homage to him. So that's important for us to know. And indeed, those who are the sons of Levi, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. So he's trying to make a point here. The Levites are in the lineage of Abraham. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now, all right, here's where we stop. Is Jesus' genealogy derived from Abraham?
Yes.
I see you hesitate.
I was trying to figure out if you're going to ask me a trick question there. Yes, he is.
It is a trick question. Yes, his genealogy is derived from Abraham, but Jesus was fully man and fully God. And his genealogy in the flesh came from Abraham, but his genealogy in the spirit was not derived from Abraham, right?
Well, yes. That's why I knew you were trying to throw a spin at me there. I knew physically he was from
his genealogy goes back to, because that was the promise. Now remember, that was the promise God gave to Abraham. And in fact, it says, but he whose genealogy is not derived from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. So Abraham had the promise of God. But Melchizedek's genealogy did not come from Abraham. The Levites did. The Levites came from the loins of Abraham. He's trying to make a distinction here, because what we're about to get into, he's making a distinction to let you know Jesus is a better priest. That's this whole section is so that the Hebrews understood, the Jews understood, if you go back to Judaism, you're giving up the true priest of God. You're giving up a priest literally coming from God. That's what the foreshadowing of Melchizedek is. Now, he may have been a man. And in fact, as we read here, it even implies or even says that he was a mortal man. But there again,
Jesus was mortal at one point.
Exactly. Jesus was mortal man also. But he was not only fully man, he was fully God at the same time. He was not, I repeat, not like the other so-called God men. Like, now, even though Zeus was mythology, that's what they try to put it in the same thing, saying, well, Jesus was mythology because it's just like Hercules. He was half man, half God. No, Jesus was fully man, fully God. Just like in many of the other with the other worshipers, the Balaam, the Molochs, and all of those who had a God man, they called him, even though it was not true. They still said it. He was a God man, just like
Demigods.
Yeah, they were demigods. But just like it's escaped me now. I can't think of the man who the one who built the
Nimrod.
Nimrod, thank you. He built the Tower of Babel. Just like Nimrod, who died and his wife had a baby, and they called it Immaculate Conception. Well, it wasn't Immaculate Conception. It was just the way it was. And so he called himself a god, but he wasn't a god. But his son was a man god, is what they called him. And so it's all of those other things, but that is not Christianity. Christianity is Jesus became fully man. That's the only way he could be used as the sacrifice for the sins of all men. Well, so what we're doing here is he is trying to make sure you understand the fact that Jesus is in the order of Melchizedek. He is not in the order of Levi. If he was in the order of Levi, then he would be half man, half God. Instead, he is in the order of Melchizedek. He's fully man, fully God. That's what he's trying to get us to understand here.
You know, the way you just said it really makes Melchizedek sound like, I mean, it really reinforces
incarnate.
It does.
Incarnate Christ.
It really does. Almost like he came down just to establish that priesthood.
The priesthood, the eternal priesthood, not the priesthood of the Levites, though.
Well, both, actually.
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose, yes, both, because the Levites came out of Abraham, but still, he was above Abraham. You remember what it said? But he whose genealogy is not derived from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. So Abraham was the top dog in the world at that time.
You know, and it's kind of funny because I was looking back to the references of a lot of what they're referring to here in Hebrews back to Genesis, and it really goes back to Genesis 14. And I know we all grew up this way. All these patriarchs, they make them seem like these old, gray-haired, 120-year-old men. I was listening to somebody the other day, and they said, you know what? If they were to teach, because in Genesis 14, Abraham had just gone and obliterated 4 kings of the world.
Right.
And he
wasn't some doddering old.
No.
Now, he was old, though.
Well, yeah.
Because I think he was 80 when he finally got called. But
back then, that was...
Yeah. He was about 100.
I mean, really, how...
But he was not some doddering old fogey. He was out there fighting with them.
And this, in the last few years, this is what I've come to realize. Why the world sees Christians as a bunch of weird, can I say pansies?
Yes.
Because if we were to teach our children that Abraham was more of a Gerard Butler from 300, where, everybody's seen the movie 300. He goes in and just decimates the armies of Xerxes. We need to let our kids watch 300 and say that
is the prophets.
Those were the prophets.
That's right. That is the prophets.
And we see the reference here. Read Genesis 14, and there is a lot of, this king and that king and all the other king. But when you get down to the crux of it, Abraham had just gone in with his tiny army and obliterated 4 major kings of the world. Do you think a gray-haired old man could have done that? And the spoils of that war is what he brought back for Melchizedek. It wasn't just, I went out and, raided a village and No, he defeated 4 kings of the world and then brought the spoils back to Melchizedek. That is what Abraham had just done prior to this passage that they're referring to here in the New Testament.
Well, and the thing is that I've talked about this before, but Jesus, I think we talked about this last week. Jesus was a carpenter, and he's pictured as some effeminate male in these pictures of almost looks like a woman. I mean, they have
Feminized him.
They have feminized him so much in all of these pictures. They have not a clue who Jesus really was. Jesus was a carpenter. Now, let me tell you something. I do my own carpentry. I've built my house. I've built my sheds. I do all this. And I'm not what I'd consider a wimp. And even at my age, I'm relatively strong. But those guys back then, I go to Lowe's.
I was just thinking that.
I go to Lowe's and I buy my 2x4s, my 2x6s, and all of those things. Those guys went and cut down trees, brought those trees back, and cut their own 2x4s.
By hand.
By hand.
Yes.
And then they bore the holes by hand, and then they put the stakes in the hole to hold everything together by hand, using hammers, saws, and all of these things. These guys, if you just picture any construction guy you've ever seen, big old burly guys, that was Jesus. Now, Samuel, when he went to pick David as the next king, when he showed up, the elders of the town came to him, met him at the city limits, and said, do you come in peace?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, the prophets carried swords, and if they were instructed to, they would go and slay an entire city. I mean, God, these were not mamby-pamby. We've got men, the men that are listening to this, we have got to understand that God has called us to be men, not to be wimps. Christians are not wimps. Christians are men. Men and women, I understand, ladies, but I'm talking to the men right now. Christians are men that are of the man's man. That is who they are.
It's funny. I was going to reference something that I posted to Facebook, but it actually looks like Facebook removed it because it was so controversial. It was a picture of a person holding a gun, and it said, "When the government comes for your guns, give them the bullets first." Now, that wasn't the point of what I wanted to make, but it was the response that I got from somebody. And here was his response. "As any good Christian would, next you'll be telling me you're pro-life." I mean, just think about the foolishness of that response. Like you said, the apostles used to carry swords. Why would they carry their swords? More than likely to defend themselves if necessary, but to go on the offensive if necessary. So for me as a Christian to post that if just think about it, my constitutional rights are violated, why am I not going to defend myself? The guns are the swords of today. And then this person has the nerve to say, I guess you're pro-life then, because apparently you're a violent,
right,
pro-gun Christian.
Right.
Yeah, I am. And I'm pro-life. So, he was trying to make the rhetorical comments. So you're going to kill people, but you're going to claim you're pro-life then too? Yeah, it's two totally different things.
Yes, absolutely. It's two totally, because you're not seeking to murder. You're defending. You're doing what
right.
Here's 1 Samuel 16:4. What I was just talking about with Samuel. It says, so Samuel did what the Lord said. The Lord had told him to go to Bethlehem and anoint the next king. Okay. So Samuel did what the Lord said, went to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming. He wasn't some weak mamby-pamby something. They said they came to him, then they trembled at his coming, and they said, "Do you come peaceably?" What does that say?
It says he was intimidating.
Let me tell you something. These prophets were not the wimps that you've seen in Hollywood or in the pictures or anything of the sort. And think about Peter. He was a fisherman.
Well, and honestly, here is my ultimate question: why do churches portray them that way?
Well,
I mean, what is it that at some point in history churches said we're going to make our own patriarchs look like a bunch of pansies?
Well,
Why?
I guess it was that. Well, we don't want to seem like we want to be. God is the God of love. Now, God is the God of love, but you see, Satan has lied. Because what Satan has done masterfully over hundreds of years, God is the God of love and he won't send anybody to hell. Isn't that what you've heard? I mean, I've heard that many, many times. God is the God of love. Who would he send anybody to hell? Well, and the answer to that question is no.
Well, if you ask
they're going to choose that for themselves.
If you ask the Pope these days, there is no such thing as hell.
Exactly. That is my point exactly. So what has happened? Over all of these years, Satan has deceived so long that, well, God is a God of love. Surely he would not have made such a place as hell.
Yeah, God would never kill anybody. Oh, let's talk about the walls of Jericho. Let's talk about why Nehemiah armed his men that were rebuilding the wall. If they're just rebuilding a wall, why do they need to be armed?
God is the God of love, but he's also the God of justice. And when it comes time for the arm of justice, he will use that. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining with us. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button, and thank you so much to all who have donated and who have prayed for us. It is our pleasure and our privilege to have you join with us as we bring the gospel of Jesus and this study of Christ in the last days around the world. Until next time, I pray you receive his gospel power today.
He died for you, he died for me. From our sin, he set us free. He loved us so, his life he gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, he's calling you. Jesus Christ is calling you. If he's touched your heart and soul, let Jesus make you whole. Come near with me and we will pray that all your sin be washed away. Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed.